Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We pick up where we left off on presidential attributes with former Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge, former Defense Secretary William Cohen, former head of the NSA and CIA Mike Hayden, former Pentagon Counsel Rosa Brooks, and from Salt Lake City, the former governor of Utah, Mike Leavitt. Rosa, I want to start with you. You write in your book how everything became war and the military became everything, about decision-making, and presidents they don't sometimes just get options A and options B. There's sometimes decisions that never get to them because they get stuck in the bureaucracy. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the U.S. government's executive branch is like an iceberg, and the president and the cabinet are sort of at the very top of the iceberg, but most of the government is way below, and the president never meets the people, and there's no reason he necessarily should. But you've got all this stuff going on at lower levels, but it's kind of like a giant machine to weed out nuance before it ever gets to the decision makers. So a lot of the time when the president's sitting there and he's sitting there with his cabinet, and you've all been in these situations, by that time, so much has been lost, sometimes for good reasons, because somebody realized early on that's a bad idea, let's not get that up to the president. But sometimes for the dumbest reasons, like it didn't fit in the bullet points. There was only going to be one page, and it sort of didn't make it onto that page. So I think it's very, very hard if you are an inexperienced president. You don't know who to ask. You don't know who to go back to and how to say, you know what, I bet there was more stuff. I want to see that. And I think this is the point that you made, that if you don't know where the more stuff is and how to access it, you find yourself facing two choices, both of which may be dumb.
Well, you know, and sometimes, if you don't mind, sometimes in the effort to build a consensus recommendation to the president, the tendency is we all want to be in unity to give the president advice. And you need a president that says, if you can't, I'm not interested in consensus at the lowest common denominator. Tell me what I need to know. And if it's a tough decision, A, B, and C, I'll make the decision.
General, there's been some reporting recently that with CENTCOM and information on ISIS. So how does the president know what they don't know? And when it's never getting to them, how do we, and as we're thinking about a campaign, what should we look for in the kind of management skills of a candidate that they know about their blind spots or where there might be potential blind spots?
So, as Rosa said, he's got to poke, he's got to pull, and the more experienced you are, the better equipped you are to do that. But let me give you a slightly different phenomenon, all right? And that's when the bureaucracy actually works well and goes into the president, and this happens in intelligence from time to time, it goes into the president with a conclusion about which they have great confidence that cuts across the president's personality, his policy, or his politics. Frankly, I think that happened a bit in the current administration with the growth of ISIS, kind of slowed a need there as that threat developed. I know it happened with me when we went in there in late '07 with an estimate that, frankly, I think still stands, that the Iranians had stopped a narrow part of their nuclear weapons program, the weaponization of the nuclear device. You could not get more unhappy information in front of President Bush and Vice President Cheney.
They didn't want to hear it.
Lord knows they challenged it.
Yeah.
But we stood our ground. And at the end, not only did the estimate stand, but because the president had been relying on a previous estimate that had said something different and had made that public, he directed that we make this estimate, with which I think he still had some doubts. He insisted we make that public too.
So they've got to be able to hear news they don't want to hear. Governor Leavitt, let me ask you about hiring. When I asked President Obama about these questions of attributes, he said that you have to realize that there's a whole group of people you hire who then go and make decisions that may never get to you. How important is hiring in terms of what this next president is going to do, and that sets up their ability to perform in office?
It's a very important point. When you hire a president, you don't hire just one person. It's a team game, if you will. Nearly 4,000 people come in following a president, and they make a lot of decisions. But in the final analysis, when all of that boils up, I was in the Oval Office one day, and President Bush said, look, they call this the Oval Office because there are no corners to hide in. Ultimately, the decision had to be his, and I think that was the point. All of this rolls up to the point that many of the decisions are able to be made by others, but in the final analysis, the President of the United States sets the tone, not just whether they will listen to information that's hostile to their original point of view, but whether those who actually come in that team of 4,000 will.
I think that's absolutely right, if I can jump in on that for a second. I remember feeling early on in this administration when I was at the Pentagon, tremendous frustration on some issues where I felt like President Obama, if only he knew he would make the right decision. He has these staff gatekeepers who aren't letting these important issues get to him. And I realized after a certain point, he's got these people there because he wants them there. You know, that ultimately presidents choose the staff they want, and they choose the staff who will enable them or not enable them to be in a bubble.
Right.
So good leaders attract good people, empower them to do whatever they do within that leader's vision. And the nature of government is so large, you really do have to rely upon them. That's just the way it is.